Ever since the first caveman picked up a spear, the fate of kingdoms and empires has been forged by men who mastered its use. And as for some men, they have always been better at waging war than others. Spartans, a warrior race in ancient Greece, were arguably the greatest military culture in the history of warfare. Spartan boys were taken away from their mothers at the age of just 7 to be inducted in the agoge, a brutal military academy where they spent the rest of their lives preparing for war. It is said that the only relief a Spartan was ever given from military training was when he was at war. Growing up in Sparta was no picnic, as the Spartan elders employed cruel and unique tactics to train their boys. From a young age, they schooled their boys in the principle of survival of the fittest, but also in the survival of the sneakiest. Spartan boys were given minimal food and were encouraged to steal rations as long as they did not get caught, thereby separating the dumb and weak from the strong and wise. The men who excelled in training became part of the elite troop known as the Hoplites. Every Spartan hoplite wielded a long spear, short sword, and a small circular shield. The principal Spartan tactic was the phalanx, which required highly disciplined and coordinated maneuvers only possible in practical battlefield conditions after lengthy and rigorous training. It was this very tactic used by the renowned 300 Spartan hoplites to defend the narrow pass of Thermopylae against 100,000 Persians for 3 days. According to written records by Plutarch, Spartan mothers on the eve of war told their sons, "Spartan, come back with your shield or on top of it." "The Norseman cometh," is a cry that echoed across vast regions of coastal Europe, announcing the imminent arrival of a Viking raiding party. While all Vikings were ruthless, among them were a separate breed of Norse warriors, the Berserkers. These warriors performed secret rituals and used substances to escape the realm of ordinary mortals. They were immune to any pain and fatigue, charging as mad hounds into battle fighting naked with no armor. The sight of even a small phalanx of berserkers leading an attack had the enemy simply dropping their weapons and running. They didn't care much for strategy and politics, but simply went with the flow. While they were arguably more terrifying than any other warrior group, they were too dangerous for their own good. The berserkers' frenzy and savagery caused them to commit uncontrollable acts, such as biting their shields and killing their own men in the heat of battle. As the name suggests, they went absolutely berserk.
We interrupt this program to bring you
Astra Gallery, our very own step-by-step guide to AI content creation. Bring your creative ideas to life.
I really look like a guy with a plan.
From cinematic films and comic adventures to history and striking visuals, our tutorials make learning in-house techniques, industry prompts, and swift animations straightforward and enjoyable. Start now at astragallery.com and make your own stellar sagas. Knight Templars were the most unique and mysterious warrior group in history. Introduced first as a religious cult devoted to protecting the life of pilgrims visiting Jerusalem, they progressively expanded their duties to become combatants in Crusader wars, and rather surprisingly, also served as the world's earliest banking system. This strange arrangement came about because pilgrims would deposit their belongings to the order as credit. The Templar Order also received large sums of donations from Europe for their holy duties. With its clear mission and ample resources, the Order grew rapidly. Templars were advanced shock troops in key battles of the Crusades. Their heavily armored knights mounted on war horses would charge at the enemy, ahead of the main Crusader army in an attempt to break opposition lines. They were trained to fight till death, as the Templar cross on their armor was a symbol of martyrdom. Their white mantle was so much a part of their life that they could neither dine nor speak with their brethren without adorning it. The Templar code of life was completely different from other military orders whose warriors were accustomed to fame and glory. Templars, on the other hand, were asked to live in poverty completely devoted to God and religion, which is rather funny, because the order as a whole was as rich as the Pope. Men were expected to be free of pride and arrogance. Upon joining the group, one had to shun all his material desires. Ties with family were severed forever, and taking women for pleasure was forbidden. Although it wouldn't be surprising if they managed to get some action every now and then. While Knight Templars were the most conservative warrior group, the Immortals lived the dream of every ancient man. They were conspicuous for the large amount of gold they adorned as they indulged in pleasure living a lavish lifestyle. Immortals was a name given by Herodotus to this elite infantry unit of 10,000 soldiers in the army of the Persian Empire. Their maintenance of this number led to their name, the Immortals. Every time an immortal was killed, wounded, taken ill, or retired, they were immediately replaced. The Immortals instantly removed their dead from the battlefield and showed no corpses to their enemies. This practice offered the illusion that these warriors were not mortals. No matter how many the enemies killed, their number would remain 10,000 strong. Their body armor comprised of overlapping plates of shining bronze and metal. With the Immortals' breastplates flashing in the sunlight, many cities simply surrendered when they first saw them approach. Their main weapon was a spear 6 feet long, while their wicker shields were covered in leather. The Immortals would stay in operation as the elite unit of the Persian Empire until they met their end through a man more immortal than them, Alexander the Great. They were defeated at the hands of Alexander in the Battle of Gaugamela, which marked not only their end, but also their empires. Perhaps not immortal after all. Like a storm unleashed from the very steps that birthed them, Mongol Horseriders descended upon nations, making them extinct. The driving force that gave rise to the largest empire in history, they shot their arrows with astonishing accuracy and power while riding at full gallop. Mongol tribesmen were the original people of the horse, and horsemanship was a lifestyle for them. They practiced from a young age, honing their ability to shoot arrows effectively from horseback. One particular Mongol weapon that often tipped the balance was the unique recurve bow that, when combined with a fast pony as a firing platform, could be utterly devastating. With a reliance on light cavalry, Mongol mobility was legendary. Each cavalryman moved with 3 or 4 horses and could rotate his mount at will. This mobility allowed them to employ their most lethal battle tactic, the feign retreat, in which they drew the enemy in, retreated, and then with the cunning of wolves, encircled and dismantled their bewildered prey. The Roman Empire. History's longest-standing empire owed its grandeur to the unwavering might of its army, the Roman legionaries. At the height of its power, Rome had around 35 serving legions, but the title of the best Roman legion is often bestowed upon Legio X Equestris. Formed by Julius Caesar during his stint as the governor of Hispania, Legion 10 Mounted was Caesar's first command. The legion fought under Caesar in the Gallic Wars, playing a decisive role in winning the Battle of Alesia and conquering Gaul. The group quickly became Caesar's favorite and most trustworthy legion. In the civil war against Pompey, they proved their loyalty and might yet again in battles at Ducerda and Pharsalus. The legionaries of Legio X Equestris were equipped with the classic Roman armament, the gladius, short sword, pilum, heavy javelin, and scutum, large shield. Their most famous moment is remembered as the Battle of Munda, the final conflict of the Roman Civil War, where sons of Pompey took arms against Caesar. Seeing his side at a disadvantage, Caesar personally entered the fray, fighting alongside his favorite warriors as he yelled to his legion, "Are you not ashamed to hand over your general to boys?" The 10th pushed back the Pompeians with all their might, winning the day and the war. In a short span of time, Legio X had become Rome's most successful legion, but what they had forgotten was the fact that their fate was too intertwined with Caesar. After Caesar's assassination in 44 BC, his adopted son Octavian recognized the need to disband this legion, who was overtly loyal to his late uncle. Although Legio X was only in service for less than 2 decades, their impact and success as a soldier group was more profound than some of the other legions who remained in service for centuries. The Sultan's pride and a formidable arm of the Ottoman military, the Janissaries emerged as the first real standing army in Europe. Up until the 14th century, men would just be called up to fight as and when a king or lord needed them. Once the war was over, the men returned to their normal life. However, the formation of the Janissary unit would change this forever, but even their establishment was an accident. It was during the reign of Murad I who ordered that a group of Christian men taken as prisoners of war be converted to Islam and then serve as his personal soldiers. He was so impressed with the results of his little project that he ordered it to be repeated. So whenever they got the opportunity, troops of the Ottoman Empire would take young Christian boys, usually from the Balkan region, make them convert and train them as soldiers. Following on from the reign of Murad, the unit grew in size and in strength to become the Sultan's most reliable fighting unit. In a battle or a siege, their task was to wait for the frontline troops to pierce a hole in the enemy's defenses, and then they would attack, swarming in and showing no mercy with their bows or muskets. This very tactic was particularly effective during the conquest of Constantinople in 1453. To maintain their discipline, Janissaries were forbidden from taking romantic partners, much like the Templars. Living a life of celibacy and serving as full-time soldiers helped them remain ahead of the game, as the unit became one of the first military groups to use gunpowder and employ firearms on a large scale. However, their growing power became a double-edged sword as they began to play a part in the Ottoman political sphere, often influencing appointment of high-ranking officials and even sultans. This led to internal corruption and decline. In 1826, Sultan Mahmud II disbanded the group, being anxious that the corps had forgotten its original purpose. To make sure they were finished for good, he had more than 6,000 Janissaries executed. The samurai warriors were the knights of feudal Japan. They were not only skilled fighters but were required to live their whole lives according to the ethical code of Bushido, also known as Way of the Warrior. The samurai enjoyed an elevated status in society and were the only ones permitted to carry swords at all times. Their blade was called the katana, a razor-sharp sword that could slice a man in half. They also wielded the yumi, a longbow used effectively both on foot and horseback. Unlike the ninja warriors of Japan, the samurai believed in fighting out in the open, ideally in the form of a duel or one-on-one combat. Skilled in jujitsu and other martial arts, they were the most versatile fighters of Japan. In battle, samurai were strategic, often using a mix of guerrilla tactics and open-field combat, underpinned by a profound sense of discipline and duty. They believed in dying as honorably as they lived, and often meditated upon their death to remove any fears. If a samurai felt he had failed in his task, he was supposed to commit seppuku, ritual suicide. This was the only way for him to regain his honor. However, the samurai's power and influence, much like the Janissaries, became their undoing. The rigid social hierarchy and their significant political power led to internal strife and a gradual decline, culminating in their eventual dissolution during the Meiji Restoration in the 19th century. Their shadow continued to fall over modern Japan, as reflected during the Second World War, when some officers in the Japanese Imperial Army performed seppuku, rather than let themselves be dishonored by being taken prisoner.